we are, April 5th, and we're going to fertilize this clover field. Now this is not quite a year old. On the 13th is when we planted it last year of April, and it came in. It was one of those, you really had to put a lot of effort in it and maintenance to get it to go. But as you can see, and I'll scan around here, it really took off. It got browsed on heavily throughout the year. You had that one 8-pointer that I found at sheds on. Found that 8-pointer was right over yonder at October 13th. But it's real critical that you fertilize right now. The ground is a little damp because this is low ground, so I'm going to hand crank it on instead of trying to push it around with my spreader, because I don't know how good I can spread it because of we might pick up mud on the tires. But that's where an ATV with a spreader would come in handy. But I just want to show you the growth on this. This area in here was eaten extensively to the ground. The deer pawed it up in January. They were really after it, and it grew in pretty good. But it is time to get the fertilizer on it. And I might dust a little seed over there in these bare spots. We got rain in the near forecast, so it's prime time to get it on. Now basically this is grass free. You can see a couple little brown spots, that's grass in there, and when it's not growing right now, but once it gets growing I will treat it with a herbicide. But so without any further more talking, I'm going to get to walking with the and I'm putting 6-24-24 on this, and the reason you do it, you want the potassium and the phosphorus, not the nitrogen, because the nitrogen, all it will do is stimulate the growth of the undesirable weeds and grasses. I think I'll go with the spreader. It seems I walked that, it seems fairly solid, and we'll just see. I'll load it light and see what happens. You notice I was wearing gloves and some sort of respirator because I don't like breathing that dust. So we'll take off down through there and see how it goes. Now you remember, when you're filling that up, you don't want to spill that on the ground. If you get too much in an area, it'll burn the ground, and you'll have it everywhere that spill was. Unless you can disperse it, you won't have any growth. So worked pretty good. Now if you can see behind me back there, there's some bald spots. So we're going to go in with our Whitetail Institute clover and seed over the bare ground. It'll get rained in, and it's just a little expenditure you have to do to get the complete coverage. So we'll get to cranking that on. Here we go, we'll crank that on. And like I say, it's bare ground up there. So this is as good as frost seeding in my world. Well, here we are back on a plot we planted 2013, and we're going to give it a treatment also. It's held up pretty good. Very little grass in it. I'll show you. It's basically grass free, and it would be approaching 6 years old, and it has a lot of attractiveness to it. So without any more to do, we'll get the spreading the 6-24-24 on. Now I want you to note how resilient this Whitetail Institute clover will be. When I bow down here, that ain't much. My first joint on my finger is about how tall that is. Maybe an inch at its most. And that's on the 5th day of April 2019. And we planted this back in 2013. Now we're going to overseed this also, crank some seed on. You can see some bare spots, which will work out good because we'll have seed to soil contact. And this is what we'll try to achieve. And if you see any tree limbs that are big, kick them off, kick them out of the way. It doesn't take much. But overall, this is a pretty good stand. And like I say, remember, it wasn't much taller. Well, I'll go down here again in this area. It ain't much taller than my thumb if I'm touching the ground. So it's, say, thumb height right now. And it's got plenty of moisture. And now we've fertilized it. And we'll do some overseeding, because you can see where the deer really tore it up in here. But that's good, because that's dirt, and the seed will cling to it, and when we get rains, it'll get washed down in there. So let's get cranking on the seed. As you can see here, this field is way too wet, and it's actually higher elevation, but there's standing water you see out in there. I'm not even going to attempt to do anything to that. Either the ground still froze underneath there, not letting that water percolate out. I don't understand that, because that's a higher elevation, but it is saturated. So there's no use even screwing around with that. That does some serious drying, because it's soaked. And like I say, it's at a higher elevation. And this field here I'll probably take out later this fall and put a annual Baraska in it, because it'll be pushing from 11 to 9. That's 9 years, 8 or 9 years, but 8 years for sure. So it's pretty well needs to be recycled. But now down here it's a little drier, but up there it's just way too wet. Yeah, I should have never drove through there. No, that'll just be a water entrapment. Oh man, I can't even walk in that. It must be leaching out of this hill. This hill must have a lot of frost in it, moisture, and it's coming down and draining out in the field. Well, here we are up on the Alfalfa rack, and it got hit pretty hard, but it's starting to green up. And we planted that on the 25th day of April last year, and it got browsed right down to the ground. So got a lot of leaf residue on it, but I suppose in time the sunlight will get to that and the heat, and that'll jump up through there. But this is what it looks like on April 5th. But it really came in good, and it's also cropped right down to the ground. That was Alfalfa Plus. And we're going to overseed some of these bare spots in here. This was where we put that secret spot. Well, it never did germinate. So we're going to come in here. We got bare ground, and we'll crank on some new alfalfa. Well, that's it. We got the perennials fertilized, and you need to do that in the spring and in the fall because they really get cropped off. And they're the mainstay of any land management program. If you don't have a good perennial, you don't have a good management program going. So it takes a lot of effort, labor, and time to keep perennials in good shape, but they're well worth the money, as you've seen time and time again on my trail cameras. So that's it from the Non-Typical.